Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Luke. How are you?
Good, thanks. And you?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good. I couldn't seem to start it.
No, I see that, and just had a bit of a hairy journey back from picking my son up. Literally screeched into the driveway and ran in. Oh, here's Lucy. We'll have to figure out why that's not the case, because it would be much better if you had full control. I'll figure that one out. Hi, Lucy.
Hi. Hello.
How are you? How are you? You're not feeling very well. Have you got a cold?
No, I the first day of London Real Estate Forum at the Barbican at the end of September, I started feeling like my throat was. I mean, I got through the real estate forum, but I've had to do a lot of work ever since. Actually, a lot of meetings, and
Yeah.
so I mean, even now I'm not 100% better.
No.
But
it wasn't COVID. Wasn't
COVID. Well, you can't tell, Lucy. You look well.
Oh,
yeah,
thank
you
you.
do. Yeah.
No, it's just so weird to have feel you come down with a cold after nearly 2 years of not having one.
Yeah.
The lockdown has had benefits in that respect. It's kept protected against these lurgers.
Totally. Do you want to test your screen share, Lucy?
Yeah, I've opened the PowerPoint, so I think
we've got Stuart Lesage in the waiting room. I'll message the waiting room.
It's this one here.
Yeah, perfect.
So if you want to just try going through, your slides, progressing forward and back. Well, we're seeing that. That's fine.
We just check whether the video works. It's sat right at the end, actually. Really there.
Slides.
It's this one here.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Looks like you just press on the screen and there it goes.
Yeah, we heard it. Do you think it was playing okay? Are you happy with that?
Yes, I think so. We can go back and just double check. Oh, you have to press on the. It's about. Yeah, I played it.
Yeah, that's okay. That's good.
3.5 minutes. So
okay, cool. Adds a bit of a je ne sais quoi to the presentation. You'll be pleased to hear I will mute myself when it starts, and I won't be making any comments.
To the beginning, yeah, right.
And I will message the waiting room now just to tell them what is the time. 5 minutes.
5 to.
Yeah.
3 minutes to.
Let me just message.
Luca, you're in your office, aren't you? I can see.
I am, yes. So we're sort of gradually getting more and more people back in, but it's more of a trickle than a flood. So do you want to be introduced as Dr. Lucy Bullivant?
No, you don't need to do that.
Okay.
I mean, you can say I've got a PhD from London Met, though, but yeah, it's really fine.
And I'm not going to read your short bio. Still got a hell of a lot in it, so I'm just going to have to summarize, if you don't mind. There's so much to...
It's really fine. Yeah, I mean, essentially, I'm a curatorial director, a play strategist, and award-winning author. But then I do have these roles like expert specialist for the Design Council, and I'm chair of the Lambeth Design Review Panel in terms of like regular commitments.
Yeah.
And I'm a trustee of Temple Bar Trust and a livery person for the company. Obviously.
Yeah, Lucy does absolutely loads for the Temple Bar Trust. Fantastic, as you probably know, Luke.
I do. Unfortunately, all of your talks have come on so far, have been on evenings that I've been unable to attend, although there was one that was it a Temple Bar one recently with Chris Williamson or not? Was that not a Temple Bar
Chris
one?
Williamson, no, that was a CPD, but there was Neil Pinder, the latest TBT.
No, I couldn't make that.
But they're all recorded if you ever want to catch up with them.
Ah, well, that's perfect.
And
Yeah.
actually, Luke, the next one on the Thursday, the 21st, is from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. if that makes any difference. It's Tara Bola Day, because we've both got things happening after that.
I will try and make it. I am actually away we're going to Venice.
Very good.
These days, that doesn't preclude watching something, so that might
Well, they're all
perfect.
Yeah, they're all on.
They're all recorded on YouTube, so you can watch whenever you want if you want. Right, so it is now 58. 2 more minutes. Are you happy, Lucy? Because I'm going to mute myself soon, and I'll probably put my Temple Bar screen on.
Okay.
Okay. Everything okay? I'm going to mute now. Do you want me to start letting them in? You happy? And you can have a chat with them. It's only Stuart Massage, Sarah Bissett-Scott, who is a recent. She was just admitted as Freeman at the last court. And she's a lovely lady. She's a doctor, Sarah Bissett-Scott. So I'll admit everyone and take the waiting room off. Okay.
So Cheryl, when you put your company slide on, that doesn't impact my slide.
No, it just hides my lovely view of my, old cardigan and nothing. It doesn't affect anything else, Lucy. Right, I'm going to let everyone in.
Okay, thanks.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm not sure whether you can hear the church bells chiming in the background. It's the church next to our studio, but we'll just give people a couple more minutes before kicking off. But thank you for joining us. Okay, I think we should make a start, and other people can join as time goes on. So, evening and welcome to the October second Monday virtual practice visit. And this is part of a series. I know many of you, a number of you have come to previous ones. The next that we have in the lineup is a new livery member, or shortly to be, if not already, who is it's Tanya from VPPR Architects talking about the Camden High Line. So that will be on the second Monday in November. But tonight we're delighted to welcome Lucy Bullivant, who I'm going to do a very brief summary of Lucy's many achievements, and she's a place strategist, curatorial director, and an award-winning author and keynote speaker. She is an expert specialist for the Design Council and chair of Lambeth's Design Review Panel, and a very active member and trustee of the Temple Bar Trust. And she's also a liveryman. as well as being a fellow of the RIBA. And she has a PhD from London Met in master planning and adaptive planning, and an MA in cultural history from the RCA. She's delivered many cultural strategies, programs and exhibitions, and has published many works, including Master Planning Futures, which was the winner of the Book of the Year from the Urban Design Group in 2014. And there's a second edition due out next year, which hopefully Lucy can tell us about. So Lucy, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us, and delighted you're here and looking forward to hearing about your practice, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Luke. It's a real pleasure to be here and to give a presentation which I've entitled Think Global, Build Social. Okay, so I work in a very multifaceted way. I think globally and I build socially, and I don't do that single-handedly, of course, and I am not a trained architect, so I work closely with a number of architects. I'll highlight the participation of one of them in a minute. What I do is as you'll gather from, if any of you have read any of my books, I evaluate urban cultural phenomena, processes and methodologies, both in my books and in online articles for my webzine, urbanista.org, which I set up in 2013, when I was very keen to get a little bit more editorial space to say what I wanted to say about livable urbanism, as I put it, which is a subject very close to my heart. And then at the same time, I play an active role in the strategic development of neighborhoods and public spaces in different locations around the world. And from 2016 and 18, here in London, I was place strategist for the £6 billion mixed-use development, Meridian Water, in the southeast corner of Enfield in Upper Edmonton. Now, I'm not going to talk about that scheme today, but we did do a webinar with the program director and the head of placemaking for my series that I set up during lockdown called Urban Manifesto. And all the videos are available on YouTube under Urban Manifesto, if you'd like to have a look at those. So my work for the last 8 years is really the subject of today's talk. During that time, I've applied my curatorial focus, which I was formally trained as a curator by the British Council's Visual Arts Department way back when after I got my BA in art history, and worked with them for 2 years, which gave me huge ability to be able to send anything, any object, any artifact anywhere in the world and display it in 1,000,001 different ways. And this has served me very well over the years as I've had the opportunity to create a number of exhibitions. But working much more recently in strategy, I found it very vital to find ways to act collaboratively on the ground with architects and with local citizens, moreover, to leverage local cultural civic life to build sustainable legacies. Let's have a look at the next slide. So moving on, so Frontiera Livre, which means invisible frontiers, is one of the 3 participatory placemaking projects that I'm going to present. So taking place in Oslo in Norway, in Shenzhen in China, and here shown Sao Paulo in Brazil. And in all 3 cases, I've led them with my collaborator, architect Alex Verunes, shown in this visual, working with members of a community group, a migrant group called CAMI, and the Brazilian art architecture collective Goma Oficina. Alex has designed and realized quite a few schools and community buildings with local communities, meaning with the actual teachers, with the pupils, with the mums, the dads, the grandpas and the grandmothers in the Philippines, in India and China. And this summer he won a special mention for the Philippine pavilion that he co-curated for this year's Venice Architecture Biennale. He has a great ability to work with a whole range of different people and with limited means to come up with wonderful solutions. So for each of these 3 projects, we strategized them to, first of all, to begin life as community co-creation workshops that we had designed. And then secondly, to evolve them into public exhibitions, illuminating aspects of the themes of 2 biennales and 1 triennale that they were invited to be part of. And in each case, they have then gone on to generate in their individual ways new impacts to transcend social exclusion in the local context of those cities. So when it comes to publications, I'll tell you a little bit about the 3 that have been very much part of my life in the last decade. There's 4 actually, because there's the webzine urbanist.org. And then, as I mentioned before, there's the Urban Manifesto webinar series, which I co-founded, curated and co-hosted with the Indian urbanist Pratima Manohar. And what we did was invite a whole host of leading global figures and local figures, including the directors of Meridian Water Enfield Council, to discuss exactly how they are advancing livable urbanism and achieving UN Habitat's Sustainable Development Goals, which are absolutely vital as a means to improving the lot of citizens in cities across the entire world. So on the other hand, the 3 books of mine have provided the systemic thinking and the design models that I've selected and discuss in the books, supporting and framing my work on the ground. And this is obviously, you can imagine it's a process of cross-fertilization, a perpetual process with the new publications. I don't like to write so many books, but I am now trying to write the 2nd edition of Master Planning Futures, which was my book that won the Urban Design Group Book of the Year award in 2014 for Routledge. And in it, I successfully argued, and they told me one reason why they gave me the award was that it was such a strong and clear polemic, was that adaptive planning wedded to local conditions, applying a master plan, but totally wedded to local realities and to social equity goals, was the only way to genuinely advance genuinely regenerative approaches and build legacy in the right way. In it, so Master Planning Futures asks whether we can, how we can, moreover, bring about socially equitable as well as ecologically sustainable change through placemaking strategies. Placemaking is a rather larger concept, a newer concept than master planning, which came on stream in the United States initially and is more allied to community participation and to the civil rights movement, where, as I see it, the master plan still remains one of the very vital tools. It's not about whether you build large scale or small scale. It can be a tool for a very small community neighborhood, but it only works properly in an active and an integrated role as part of an intelligent set of strategic tools forged and tested and adaptive in iterative ways. So It was Renier de Graaf, the Dutch master planner, one of the partners of OMA, Rem Koolhaas's practice, who described master planning as a very strange mixture of urban design and brand marketing. And while an ideological purity in master planning approaches still pervades in very generic top-down instances, even not creating sufficient or the right kind of social infrastructure, I find the organic mix of systemic thinking and practices of placemaking, which is more holistic, more messy, and far more compelling, and enables deeper step changes that are resilient and have a chance to, as I say, to build legacy. So working on the second edition, I've been reflecting on research trips that I was able to do, an awful lot of them, unlike the last 2 years. For the first edition, to rapidly growing cities, for example, like Chengdu in China, which were rapidly themselves applying garden city tactics. And this photograph by Daniel Schwartz at ETH in Zurich conveys to me quite well the disjunction between urban plastic surgery development, very, very rapid and very, very thorough, hugely transformative in its appearance, and then the fine grain organic community milieus of street markets, and the question of whether residents' choices are being truly embraced. So my second book, 2016, was called Recoded City, Co-Creating Urban Futures, which was to address this lack of well-illustrated exemplar stories about participatory placemaking projects and the key decisions that were made. So we commissioned these graphics to show the stages of making and adapting projects. This is a retrofitting of an uncompleted high-rise in Sao Paulo. I wrote this book with Thomas Ermacora, and we found that by commissioning the graphics and having to explain to the graphic designers what we wanted at every stage, it really helped us to understand the reasons why choices were made. That's the cover of the book, with a double helix, very organic, biological, but also very digital, which was exactly what my co-author Thomas Ermacora envisioned as a way of seeing the value of participatory placemaking, using digital techniques as part of the process, if needed or if appropriate, but also very much geared towards building greater greater quality human-centered design, and supporting issues of including biodiversity and so on. So here's a wall of some of the spreads from the book. And then thirdly, I published in 2017 a multi-author publication called 4D Hyperlocal Cultural Toolkit for the Open Source City. And across the many essays, including mine, the book evaluated community uses of what we call geolocal technologies and GPS-enabled mobile devices. Our mobile phones can tell us more about where we are and where we want to get to in a city than street maps, physical street maps, can ever do. So we made the argument that established linear design methods being replaced by adaptable mapping processes and real-time data streams. And this shifts the emphasis in urban design from the creation of objects and spaces to collaboration with users, from centralized to distributed participatory systems, but it all hinges on the quality of the design of the actual apps themselves. And there have been a number of wonderful examples of participatory apps, and at a basic level, where would we be without our WhatsApp? In fact, WhatsApp went down, didn't it? And a lot of people couldn't get to their community groups or their meetings as a result, because they couldn't contact their friends and family. So turning to my on-the-ground work, it's very clear that residents of many neighbourhoods today suffer what we could call the monocultural development approaches of the past, where houses were delivered, blocks of houses, but there wasn't any thought given to providing the diversity of social infrastructure that we need. And that whole approach is very much seen as anachronistic now in the age of the 15-minute city, which is a concept that's become very much in vogue, has become very much talked about during lockdown, as we've focused on the quality of life in our individual neighbourhoods as well. So it's not just about physical deficit. This is also about failures in policies to acknowledge and give voice to diverse lived experience in cities, leading to dislocation, disconnection, and chronic loneliness and mental illness. And this is an opportunity for a mix of participatory and integral, meanwhile, creative reuse to generate new futures, by which I mean meanwhile, so shorter tenure projects or retrofitting of existing structures with say 10 to 15-year leases. And during that time, communities can develop their own sense of organizational and leadership skills, their own community cultural activities, and hopefully then the leases get extended, and what was an unloved, discarded building or not valued becomes something that really helps to generate a strong sense of social cohesion, which is very important. So one question that gets increasingly asked on the ground in neighbourhoods is, are my views going to be fully reflected in urban regeneration and development? And there's definitely been huge efforts to close the gap since the early 1960s, when Jan Gehl and the famous urban planner Jan Gehl and his psychologist wife Ingrid began studying how people interacted in public urban spaces, and went on and here we go, created a huge wealth of just looks like the documentation for one of my books, actually. But they really made copious notes and took photographs based around their observations of human activity. So I would argue that there's a big difference between being closely observed in your behavior patterns and actually being, as a citizen or resident, being an active part of neighbourhood evolution, being able to express your civic identity in urban space. And this is an image from the Sao Paulo Metro showing our Frontiera Livre project. Whoops, and I will tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But just as an aside, well, it's all related, I am a chair of Lambert's Design Review Panel, which was founded in 2019, evaluating master plans and buildings for proposals for the borough in groups of 4 or 5 as panel members. And my work in this field began when I was as a Renaissance advocate for the Renaissance Towns and Cities programme led by Yorkshire Forward, which no longer exists. Just like all the regional development associations, it was closed down in 2010. And I became a member of the steering group for the first ever regional Yorkshire Design Review Panel, set up just at the point that they closed. And then I was subsequently asked to become a member because it went on in perpetuity. It's still going very well. It heartens me. Now, design review panels don't include community members, so it heartens me greatly that since that point, not only more design review panels exist, and in London, far more of the local boroughs, 32 authorities have design review panels now than ever before. And above all, a new genre, community design review panels are being set up. And the work of frame projects is instrumental in this respect. They have been in the forefront of pioneering this new genre, and they allow citizens to share their local expertise with developers and planning authorities in well-chaired meetings. So now I'm going to talk about the Oslo project, our cultural initiative to place a multicultural suburb of Sletterlocka in northeast Oslo, and it has a 2,500 strong community living next to a district called Vietvet. It's located on very high ground. You can see the linear blocks visible with the beautiful green Groruddalen Valley in the background. It was developed in the 50s, and now, until now, incredibly, apart from one shop, one dentist practice, it has lacked local amenities, which means residents have to travel outside the area to access them and enjoy leisure activities. The district's got the highest proportion of non-Western immigrants in the whole of the valley. And around 10 to 15% of the population, around 250 to 400 residents, are actively involved in the local community. Overall, there's a great need for more organised leisure activities as part of creating a robust, sustainable, socially sustainable neighbourhood and it would be beneficial economically as well, with a pleasant outdoor environment where more people know each other and solve common challenges. So people live closely together. However, as the months and years go by, many of the residents from across the different ethnic communities there, so a number of Norwegian, but also Pakistani, Tamil, Somali, Vietnamese, for example, Sri Lankan, have not yet met each other. So it's sort of passing ships in the night kind of syndrome, which is quite sad, really. And the local authority, which is our client, working in conjunction with Sletterlocka Arrangiamenti, the longest established community group, are determined to turn this situation round. People move away quite regularly in some cases, to buy properties and obtain a larger family house. So we have a situation where the social infrastructure, but also the accompanying cultural programs have always been limited. And all these factors lend the area a sense of social anonymity, of local anonymity, and the lack of strong social bonds between community members. So we were invited in to, from the beginning of 2019, to convert and creatively repurpose a disused kindergarten building there. The kindergartens and the schools are generally around the periphery of the area, outside the bounds of Sletterlocka, which is a shame, because ideally you need a kindergarten building and a community centre, which is the role of this building once it's opening next week, in fact. And we've reinvented it together with residents to respond to their needs for a versatile, well-equipped grendehus, or community centre. And our project has been endorsed by the Deputy Mayor of Oslo, the youngest ever Deputy Mayor, a Sri Lankan woman whose nickname is Kamsi. And Kamsi, as a child, grew up in the area and attended the kindergarten, and has very fond memories of living there, in spite of the fact that there's this dire lack of social infrastructure. So here's an excerpt of the new programs that we're introducing. So growing a sense of belonging, identity, loyalty, commitment, and community amongst residents is not unlike cultivating a garden, and it's a slowish process, but co-creation where you work through workshops and you really listen to and encourage people, draw them out on their wishes and their needs, is really a vital means. So it's a collaboration, forging collaboration between equal partners in a trusting environment where everyone's voice is equally valuable. So Lars Bjornstad, which is the local authority project leader, he says, in his view, input from a resident on disability benefits has as much to contribute as a doctoral fellow. So to ensure that our co-design process was robust and fully democratic, we co-opted the long-standing Norwegian social democratic practice of dugnad, that's D-U-G-N-A-D. And with our 4-member architecture team, we involve residents in actively selecting directions for the design and the conversion of the building. All of the work ideation is displayed on the walls here. Learning about options, techniques and processes, building their attachment to their future community home, and volunteering to paint walls, strip floors, strip out extraneous elements and so on. So each dugnad ended with a meal cooked by different residents, and music performed by musicians in the neighborhood. And at long last, as I said, the Grindehus has its soft opening this week, and prior to some stencil workshops for the facades of the building next week, in early November, and then the launch party is in early December. So for the first time since 2 years, I think it is, yeah, 2 years ago, I will be going back to Oslo. So here we go. The process has given me the opportunity to devise and apply a full range of place strategies. So creative reuse of a disused building, co-creation workshops involving a range of participants. So activities including that we have got planned now that we can go back to in-person activities, which is fantastic. So the facade stencils, they're also stencil printing to create cushions, soft furnishing, cushions and tea cloths and so on with their own designs. Furniture making, urban gardening, music, food and drink, clubs are part of the elements. So the analysis also that's been key of different local needs based on interviews and feedback that we've conducted and feedback from the workshops. So we made an exhibition that was staged at the Oslo Architecture Museum about our workshop vision to create the Grindehus called Dugnad Days for the 2019 Oslo Architecture Biennale. And now there will be a 2022 Triennale. There will be one in September next year. So we're talking to the director, the new director who's set a theme of mission neighborhood very shortly this month to look at how our best evolved neighborhood work can be represented this time round, and whether we have scope to propose other neighborhood architecture and design activities that we know about and we feel would fit the ethos. Upcycling of materials and structures is already really widespread in Oslo. And in December, we're also shipping a disassembled house structure that was exhibited in the Japanese pavilion at the Venice Architecture Biennale. So here's another community structure we will figure out how to creatively reuse with and for the community in 2022. So since January, through scenario planning, we've evolved a cultural program strategy to nurture the skills of engagement and leadership of groups on the ground. So we're planning a community festival for next June with the most active excuse me, participants, and gradually picking up the inputs of a wider group. of individuals who are hearing about the activities via WhatsApps in a range of languages from their friends and family. So our challenge is really expanding the ecosystems of the existing organizations, organizations that can grow really at grassroots level. So we already know there's a very strong group of mothers who provide support, bonding, information, and whatever newcomers from different ethnic groups need before helping them to bridge and link to others and ports of call for organizational support. So based on the community discussions through Dugnad, we know that there are plans latent for dinner clubs, a language cafe, a music club, youth organization. They're just all waiting for the Grendahus to open so they can connect with the central base in real time and on the ground and work out how to take things further forward. But the motivation is now much higher. So we have built up awareness of residents' needs by doing video interviews. Here we go. For the project, working with the filmmaker Aurora Brecker. And the way we work represents an engaged mode of practice, strongly emerging in architecture, even though currently in architectural education, even in Norway and in the UK, is a little bit slow to catch up and teach inclusive design. I know Westminster contacted me and were very keen to have me give a talk. And I think participatory design in a more informal sense has been part of community life for centuries, but its significance today is heightened because it's become so easy for divisions to be created in society and adversely influencing people through social media. So on to the Sao Paulo project. I have less to say about this because Sletaloka is the live project and Sao Paulo and Shenzhen took place at an earlier point in time. So for the Sao Paulo Biennale of Architecture, we convened members of the Kami migrant group, architects and artists, members of Goma Oficina collective in the city, and students at one of the universities who made a film I'll show in a short while, with the Metro organization as our partner, and they provided their everyday public transport infrastructure as our installation spaces. And I'll quickly flick through the images. So together the group learned through workshop all the techniques for creating vivid printed installations with personal symbols of their own that they created, messages symbolizing messages of hope in different metro stations they chose themselves, setting a precedent for an environment which is quite fine, really, rather beautiful in a spare kind of way, but only occasionally used for commercial art displays and advertising. As you can see, lots of empty space, but so for this project, we called, together with the group, we decided we'd call it Frontiera Livre, Invisible Borders. The issue is really at the core is that migrants aren't listened to and they're not seen as protagonists in civic space. They're marginalized by invisible borders while being very much present in the city and helping it function. So our project reinvented the anonymous spaces with these symbolic self-made works expressing the identities of our group members, claiming the public spaces as their own environments, if only for the period of the Biennale. So here's a short video. Oh.
Lève à monter il faut qu'on prenne précaution. Milia, moitié, tu es milo. M'en vais jamais, dis-moi, licher mon nom. Milo, dis-moi, pas attention, mon nom. La jalousie qui fait mon divaguer. Milia, moitié, tu es milo. Ou dans pays, tout bagaille, c'est magie. Milo, dis-moi, pas attention, mon nom. M'en vais jamais, dis-moi, licher mon nom. Milia, moitié, tu es milo.
A gente escolhe a linha vermelha do metrô para colocar algumas mensagens em relação com os imigrantes. Esse aqui é um imigrante, aquele lá é a autoridade e outras pessoas brasileiras. Aí o imigrante está sempre do lado, sozinho, e a autoridade está olhando para brasileiros, para outras pessoas, está ignorando imigrantes.
Esse aqui é desconhecer. Quando você não conhece os direitos, as leis aqui, você fica longe das pessoas que conhecem. Então, você não fica com um pontinho aí, longe. Mas quando você a conhece, você se integra aí.
Kasina simana ngai alingina yokae kombo ekomana kimia alingina yokae unité nationale amour de la patrie et conservation nationale. Alingina yokae enfant soldat basila la rébellion ici là.
Okay, so now just a quickie about the Shenzhen project. Here is Beishizu. It's set in the context of Beishizu, which is an urban village within Shenzhen, under threat of perpetual threat, it seems, of redevelopment. Shenzhen in the Pearl River Delta is rapidly expanding megacity. And we created a project for the Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism. Here are our group. What we did was to create a fertile exchange between the creative industries, that obviously includes architecture, and a fashion manufacturer there. This is their premises, bringing together architectural students from the universities of Shenzhen and Hong Kong, their professors, and a whole group of workers who are predominantly women, whose industrial sewing machines were really key into the process, because we created a whole range of fantastic bespoke textile hangings, which were created in order to make a wonderful exhibition at the Biennale. So they're very expressively patterned, and they convey, here are some of the workers, and they convey, here we are in the former flower factory venue of the Biennale, enormous building, next to the V&A's installation. And again, the idea was that the installation should represent and reflect images that somehow spoke to the textile workers. Meanwhile, you know, every day working away on fashion garments sent all around the world, doing the same thing every day. This was something very bespoke and personal to them, that they gave them the opportunity to express their own patterns and, you know, wish for creativity in their lives. So we also put into the exhibition their statements about their lives and how they found transcended the difficulties they experienced. They worked very, very long hours and only get to go home to their families and elsewhere in China once a year, like so many workers in cities. So what we did was effectively create a catalyst, which meant that Design Society, which is an exhibition centre that was set up, the Victoria and Albert Museum helped to set up a few years ago in Shekou in Shenzhen, where the Biennale is. And Design Society, through the director Ola Baumann, the Dutch curator, commissioned our own worker collaborators and their colleagues to create and produce other bespoke creative products. So while in Sao Paulo, here is another image of Beishizu. So while in Sao Paulo, the migrants felt divorced from their cultural context, the issue in Shenzhen was that work culture was very rigid and confined by commercial imperatives that threatened people's living spaces. And at a time when China is building its design capacities through expressive activities and putting a lot of funding into training people up to work as museum directors and curators, designers at every level. At the same time, architects are divorced from the lives of ordinary people in many cases, and architectural students rarely get to work directly with individuals and residents in these informal spaces in China's urban villages, with the exception of figures like Joshua Bolshover and John Lin, who teach, architects who teach as British and Chinese collaboration, who teach at the University of Hong Kong and run a rural urban framework. And they do just that, but they're very much in the minority. So while at the center of Oslo, here seen spectacular center, creative programming is really constant. A key issue in suburban Sletaloka is that there's been no central community base to meet up and collaborate, and very little programming besides the annual street party and the Christmas tree. People don't know their neighbors. They go outside the neighborhood to socialize, and due to a lack of alternatives, children are obliged to play in what are quite dangerous streets lined with parked cars. So systemic change is needed, and I've noticed and documented in my books figures such as the Guatemalan architect Eddie Cruz, who works in San Diego and Tijuana. He works to mediate between the top-down institutions and bottom-up agencies to solve, here shown, housing problems through multifaceted planning solutions. So just to quickly sum up my feeling about the creative agency of placemaking. The global body Placemaking X, which was founded in New York, and this is a Center of Urban Pedagogy in New York that I wrote about in Recoded City. More than just promoting better urban design, placemaking, they say, facilitates more satisfying, more locally nurturing patterns of public use by paying particular attention to the physical, cultural, and social identities that define a place and support its evolution, and helps build local self-determination. Now, we know from experience that divergent agendas frequently ignore the wishes of people inhabiting places, and too often result in mediocre or worse outcomes for the people who live, work and play there. So participatory placemaking is mediatory work. And again, another image of the very creative activities of the Centre of Urban Pedagogy. Placemaking centres on work that builds holistic responses that sustain life throughout communities. And that requires a constant inquiry about why the things are the way they are and what people want to make them different, and how such changes can actually be achieved, which is very, very complementary with the architect's role. But also at the same time, it is a very, very important augmentation of the architect's role. And I hope that gives you an introduction into the type of work that we're doing. And obviously Sletoloka is a live project, and we look forward to huge further advances on the ground in the next 9 months. So thank you for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lucy. We've got
more than thank you, actually, I think.
More than thank you.
Yeah.
We've got some questions that I'd like to ask that have been put. I'll just ask the ones that have been typed in first, and then if people have other questions, please feel free to ask them. So we have one here which is very relevant and present in any practicing architect's mind. Unfortunately, we seem to work in quite a confrontational industry. Could you elaborate on how your role brings communities and developers together, and what lessons you bring from overseas? Because clearly you work, all across the world. How can that be brought to bear in the UK?
Well, when the terrain of developers is all about trade-offs, as I've learned over the years, and I'm learning very much working in the context of design review, where particular sites invariably involve certain potential demolitions of structures, which may be very, there are obviously a range of protagonists within the picture who can put up defences against certain demolitions and so on. I don't go out on a limb to work directly with developers. I think I was very, very lucky to have the opportunity. It was a real honour to work with Enfield on Meridian Water, because I was working with them at the time when the council was seeking to go really form a collaboration with a commercial developer, and they would be the master developer. But then there was a change in administration, and the new leader, Nesel Kaliskan, surveyed the master plan documents and quickly came to the decision that it would be much, much better for the council, if more complex and more expensive, if they became their own master developer, because they've been successfully buying up plots of land. And obviously you need developers in the process who become partners to deliver homes, but the Enfield maintains control of the process. And I've written a whole new essay about Meridian Water in the new edition of Master Planning Futures, as indeed I've also written about Thamesmead and King's Cross, because it actually, this time round, it has quite a lot more focus, and Project Riverside in igloo regeneration in Sunderland. With Sletoloka, the wider area is being regenerated by the local council, working with developers. But we are ourselves, they're not planning to drastically regenerate Sletoloka, but have chosen to take this much more grassroots path, which I find it's not a question of either or, but I find there's more of a role for someone like me working with architects to play the participatory, mediating, facilitating role. And
you're a mediator, typically appointed by local government or the local authority to act on
so
behalf of the planners,
I have a two. Well, in Sletterlock, I have a two-headed client. So I have the community, longest-standing community group, Arrangiamenti, and the local authority with whom I have a contract.
Thank you, Lucy. If there are other questions, would people like to put up their hands or unmute themselves and ask? Nigel?
Oh, sorry. Hello. I was just trying to get the tech working. Sorry. Hi, Lucy. I just wanted to ask if you could sort of talk a bit more about the process of working with the architects that you work with. On a sort of fairly granular level. How are you interacting with them, and how are they responding to you in a broad sense? And particularly on Meridian Water, which is a project that my press been involved. I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Oh, right. Well, so Meridian Water, I finished my contract on that in 2018, but I can talk about both the ongoing. So with Alex and his team and our team, we have very much collaborative leadership. We figure things out together, and we're very interactive because while I'm not directly on the ground talking to community members about the design options for the retrofitting, I am very much part of the process in terms of anything that is complementary to that. And when I worked on Meridian Water, I worked very closely with Karakusevich Carson and related architectural practices who were involved, like Fifth Studio, whose new centre of open making workshop is opening in November, building blocks. And actually, since I stopped working with them, I've written a number of articles, and I've gone back, found it so enjoyable to go back and interview everybody from the leader to the program directors and program director Peter George and various architects. And indeed, in order to make a good chapter for Master Planning Futures, it's required me to interview everyone from the landscape architects. Architects love being interviewed, it has to be said. Working with architects, I have a huge advantage that the people I'm working with in Oslo and have known for quite some time they've all taught themselves to be participatory specialists. And Maria, one of them, for example, who's an architect, has set up a participatory body herself. And we work very harmoniously together, and we created two booklets that provide guidance on participatory processes for anyone who wants to take part in or actually lead projects like this themselves, which we showed to the GLA's regeneration department, and they thought it was really they were good exemplars of practice.
Have you been continuing to do it through lockdowns and through the pandemic, or how has it worked?
Well, through lockdown, we've had a lot of Zoom meetings with, including we have Brazilian designers who are working with the community, another set of Brazilian called Jamac, who are going to be leading the stencil workshops. Because we knew in February it would take quite a while, so we had a lot of meetings and did a lot of scenario planning. and a local filmmaker carried on doing our interviews. I mean, people basically advanced as best they could without, with all the physical restrictions. But now, obviously, since September, we've been able to start moving at pace, which is really so rewarding to find ourselves at this point.
And does dugnad have a specific meaning when you're referring to that as a?
It means joint decision making. It's one of those words that, like, there are quite a few in the English language which are quite hard to directly translate, but it connotes a very, very communal, collaborative form of decision making, reaching consensus.
The opposite of British Parliament.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. I would say, I mean, my problem is the word placemaking has, of course, been hijacked by so many developers and so many architects to think they're doing good. And I think what you've just outlined, I have to say, is fantastic and refreshing, and should make us all understand that placemaking is no simple word. And you said consensus is a great word. Actually, consensus is a great word. Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned meanwhile uses for 10 to 15 years, which I guess brings up. Does meanwhile have everything is meanwhile if it goes on for long enough? Is there a particular time period that can apply to it?
Well, Meridian Water, for example, has made a virtue out of having quite long leases for its the properties that it's already using for meanwhile. Meanwhile can connote just simple pop-up ephemeral events, but increasingly within regeneration, meanwhile is becoming integral rather than incidental. It's being less related to community. It's disconnected from the idea of just something that comes along like a coffee wagon, for example, and then goes away. And much more to something that can grow and build networks with the outer, build networks, a conduit for networks and created connections with the surrounding area and within the area itself. I mean, with our Grendehus, we don't want it to go back to being a kindergarten, which is unlikely. We'd like it to be there in perpetuity, but local authorities tend to work in, fixed term leases. So we know it's there for 12 years, 10 to 12 years, and then it'll be reviewed. But by that stage, we see it as crucibles, because what it's incubated, hopefully, is a whole range of common interest community groups that will be resilient and not die out and build their strength and dynamism, irrespective of where they're based. But that does beg the question if they need more physical properties in which to work and to meet.
Presumably,
one building can't be enough. It's a bit like when Tate Modern opened. They had a certain estimate of how many visitors would go there in the first 3 months, and it was wildly exceeded. Herzog and de Meuron didn't quite anticipate. Well, I'm sure architects today are very aware that new buildings can be wildly popular, and then almost immediately require more space.
But in somewhere like Meridian Water, you're working presumably with local community groups, but then it's a vast area where ultimately you're going to end up having attracted many more people to the area. So how do you draw participation from wider London into an area that is beyond the immediate local, but including the local people as well?
Well, they've had a very successful live music program, which has been obviously truncated by lockdown, which has been back in action this summer, and that's been the main way in which people have been attracted to go to the area. And then when the makerspace opens, there'll be all sorts of, you can sign up and have demonstrations and tours. And they hope that obviously that will create a wider range of creative makers and would-be makers to the centre, to create a resource that is really porous to the wider community.
Yeah. Well, I hope that they're as visually powerful as the works at Shenzhen and in Sao Paulo, because you don't really need language to see how fantastic those creations are, and they're universal, go beyond the immediate language of words. So it's great to see. Does anyone else have a question? How do you I'm going to ask a further one, which is how do you manage to work across so broad a geography, and what do you think the urbanista principles are that seem to be? Sao Paulo is obviously quite different from Shenzhen and different from Oslo. They're vastly different cities in scale, geography, and ethnicities. So what unites them?
Well, the logistics part of the question at the outset it has involved an awful lot of traveling. I have, over the years, I have spent a lot of my time in other countries around the world, and obviously during lockdown it's been very tricky not being able to go to Oslo, but then obviously we've had to call a halt. So it's fantastic that things are now back in action, and I've already been to Hamburg to interview the CEO of Hafen City there again for Master Planning Futures, give a short talk to the head of planning at the city council who used to work at the GLA, the German guy. In the end, I think that the imperative is to work in the field of livable urbanism for transcending boundaries of social inequality, and so participatory practices need to be bespoke, because you're always working with different people, different interests, different funding models, different organizational models, different languages, and so on. But there are a number of core principles that outlined in my in my Recoded City book, and that we regard as being very valuable and appear in our booklets, Action and Reflection, that we created for the Oslo project. That will help anybody who wants to institute a process like this, whether or not they have a retrofitting project as part of it or not. They just want to achieve greater accord about particular topics in a community, working with local residents. So I think, you know, wherever it is, we're looking for common ground, but we're keeping our eyes open and our ears attuned to what we hear. So you have to take in a lot of information, and you have to be responsive to it, and examine the meanings and the hidden meanings of whatever it is, and advance with great sensitivity, rather than trying to stamp your, you know, put your own imprint down too forcefully. I mean, the idea of using the metro came out of the director of the Sao Paulo Biennale's wish to work not with museums and galleries, but with everyday spaces, and introduce something that would be not just eye-catching, but have a deeper meaning.
And can I ask now how your latest or your updated edition of Master Planning Futures, when is it out? This is your opportunity to tell us all about it. And
well,
what's the update?
If everything goes to plan, it should be published in June of next year. I'm actually, in a few weeks' time, I hear whether I receive a grant from the Authors Foundation, which will be building on grants that I had from the Society of Authors last year during lockdown. Because writing non-fiction books about topics of urbanism is a field in which there are relatively few grants. And last time round, I was very lucky. I received a discretionary grant from CABE, Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment. But as we all know, CABE no longer exists. And various other grants that were related to research trips. So this time round, I've tried to progress by subsidizing it through my consultancy work. But obviously none of us foresaw that a pandemic would happen. But I've made some very good progress. So next June is likely to be when it's going to be ready, and it'll have, as I said, it'll have a much it'll have a whole section of the book devoted to particular stories of master planning within the context of regeneration in the UK. Very, very tough to decide because you can't be comprehensive, otherwise it would be an encyclopedia, but I give attention to the overall editorial balance. In some cases, it's about the whole city, as in the case of Copenhagen, and in other cases, say, Hafen City in Hamburg, it's specifically about Hafen City. And then with China, I'm still weighing up whether it should be 2 or 3 different projects across China, and calling on my research contacts on the ground for latest information, because I'm hindered in not being able to actually do any research trips further afield.
Great. Well, I'm very much looking forward to it. Please let us know when you have a date for publication.
Thank you.
I think we should try to think about how we could possibly help as an organisation.
Excellent idea.
That's a scary idea, I know, but why not?
Yeah. I will put it forward.
Can I just put that forward? Because
that would be greatly welcomed.
Well, it's what we as an organisation should be doing, is it not?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. I've put a vote forward, certainly.
Excellent. And Lucy,
sorry
before I give you a final, that's great. Before I give you a final thanks, could you let us know when the next Temple Bar Trust talk is as well?
Okay, so we had a little technical hitch, but we now have up on the Temple Bar website, we have the details of Tara Boladay's talk, which is responsive design, which she is the co-founder of Boladay Design Studio, and she was the sustainability lead for Harlow and Gilston garden town for quite some time. She's also, with her partner, up for the studio is shortlisted for Building Design Young Architect of the Year. I mean, they've achieved so much and they're rapidly expanding. She's going to talk about both their architecture and their policy projects to advance environmental, economic and social sustainability. So that's the 21st of October and it's at from 5 to 6, exceptionally because of other commitments. And then on the 21st of November, we have, sorry, the 18th of November, we've got Julia Barfield of Barfield, Marks Barfield. We will know by then whether the Cambridge Mosque by the practice has won the Sterling Prize or not, because it's Sterling Prize is next week, isn't it? But
on Thursday, actually.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, on this Thursday.
This Thursday, yeah.
Julia and Tara are both steering group members of Architects Declare that was set up a short while ago to promote architectural and developmental awareness of climate change and how to overcome and find strategies to mitigate its effects. And I think they're both going to be fascinating talks. I really look forward to them.
Fantastic. Well, Lucy, a huge thank you from me and from all of us. Fascinating talk, and look forward to both of those talks and also to the publication of your updated book. So if everyone could give a round of applause, please, to Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you on the 8th of November for our next virtual practice talk, which is Tanya von Pressen of VPPR, talking about the Camden Hyde line. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, Lucy. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye. It's fine. Well done, Lucy. It's a great talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I ran out of water. I'm still.
I know you sound really like you're struggling with your dry throat. I can almost feel the pain. It's not nice, is it? Especially when talking for an hour.
I've got over the pain, but I think I've got my humidifier on in the background, but I really, ideally, I'd have 2 glasses of water.
Yeah, it's the
here,
drops,
one.
isn't it? It's that when you just feel like you're just going to have a coughing fit. And well, you did really well. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I think I pretty much held it together without coughing.
You did really well done.
I've got to chair a Lambeth Design Review panel again tomorrow. We've got a lot of them at the moment. I've got another one from 10:30 to 1:30. So I'm going to have a whole 2-litre bottle of water by my desk.
Yeah, which brings on a whole host of other problems, doesn't it? You know, if you drink too much water, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, have a lovely evening, Lucy.
Thanks a lot.
That was really great. See
you. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.